The morning briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command buzzed with the familiar tension that came before high-stakes missions. 8 Navy SEALs sat around the metal table, their attention focused on the classified intelligence photos scattered before them. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across weathered faces, each man carrying the weight of countless operations behind enemy lines. All except one. Petty Officer First Class. Sarah Ghost Martinez sat at the far end of the table, her compact frame dwarfed by the broad shoulders of her teammates. At 28, she had earned her place among these elite warriors through 3 years of grueling training and 2 successful deployments. Yet the questioning glances from some of the newer team members reminded her that proving herself was an ongoing battle. Lieutenant Commander Jake Hawk Morrison stood at the head of the table, his weathered face grim as he pointed to aerial reconnaissance photos of a compound nestled in the mountainous terrain of Afghanistan. The black and white images showed a fortress-like structure with multiple buildings surrounded by high walls and guard towers. Intelligence indicates this compound houses 3 high-value targets, Morrison began, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years in special operations. General Khalil Nazir, the Taliban's regional commander, General Ahmad Shah, their logistics chief, and General Omar Rashid, head of their training operations. These 3 men are responsible for coordinating attacks that have killed over 200 coalition forces in the past 6 months. The room fell silent as the weight of the mission settled over them. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Bull Thompson, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks, leaned forward to study the photos more closely. His scarred hands traced the compound's perimeter as he calculated angles and distances. "What's our insertion point, sir?" asked Petty Officer Second Class David Reaper Collins, the team's explosives expert. His lean frame and sharp eyes made him look more like an accountant than a demolition specialist, but Sarah had seen him work miracles with C4 and timer devices. Morrison flipped to the next photo, showing a ridgeline approximately 1,500 meters from the target compound. "We'll insert here via helicopter at 0200 hours. The terrain provides natural concealment, but it also presents challenges. The compound sits in a valley with limited approach routes. Intelligence suggests approximately 40 enemy combatants on site, with rotating patrols and fixed positions in the guard towers." Petty Officer First Class. Tommy Wire Rodriguez, their communications specialist, studied the topographical map with the intensity of a chess grandmaster. His fingers traced elevation lines and possible communication dead zones. "Sir, what's our timeline? Local forces response time?" "We have a 6-hour window before potential reinforcements arrive from the regional base. However, our primary concern isn't ground forces." Morrison's expression grew darker as he pointed to another set of photos. "Satellite imagery shows 3 armored vehicles and what appears to be a mounted heavy machine gun position overlooking the valley. Any direct assault would result in unacceptable casualties." The team exchanged glances. They had faced difficult odds before, but the compound's defensive positioning made it nearly impregnable for a traditional assault. Sarah studied the photos with the methodical precision that had earned her the nickname Ghost. Her ability to appear and disappear without a trace, whether in urban environments or mountain terrain. "What about the rooftops?" asked Petty Officer Second Class Kevin Torch Williams, their close-quarters combat specialist. The former Marine's Brooklyn accent carried a note of skepticism as he examined the compound's layout. "Looks like limited visibility from those guard positions." Morrison shook his head. "The buildings are too close together for rappelling, and the guards have overlapping fields of fire. Intel suggests they've learned from previous raids in the region. This isn't some hastily constructed hideout. It's a purpose-built fortress." Chief Thompson's gruff voice cut through the analysis. "So what's the play, sir? We didn't come here to admire their architecture." The lieutenant commander's pause stretched longer than usual, and Sarah recognized the weight of command in his silence. She had seen that expression before, the look of a leader calculating acceptable losses against mission objectives. Long-range precision strikes, Morrison finally announced. We establish overwatch positions on the ridgeline and eliminate the high-value targets during their morning briefing. Intelligence indicates all three generals meet daily at 800 hours in the compound's central building. The room erupted in low murmurs as the team digested this information. Long-range shots in mountainous terrain presented numerous variables: wind speed, atmospheric pressure, target movement, and the ever-present possibility of scope glint giving away their position. "What's the distance, sir?" Sarah asked, her voice calm despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her veins. Morrison consulted his notes. Approximately 1,800 meters. The shot would need to be taken from an elevated position with significant wind variance due to the valley's geography. A heavy silence fell over the room. 1,800 meters, over a mile, was an extreme distance even for the world's best snipers. The variables became exponentially more complex at such ranges, where a slight miscalculation in wind speed or atmospheric pressure could send a bullet several feet off target. Chief Thompson was the first to speak, his voice carrying the wisdom of countless combat operations. "Sir, with respect, that's beyond the effective range for guaranteed hits. At that distance, we're talking about maybe a 30% probability of success, and that's under ideal conditions." Petty Officer Collins nodded in agreement. "The wind patterns in these valleys are unpredictable. We could be dealing with gusts that change direction every few minutes. Even our best marksmen would struggle with those variables." Sarah felt the familiar tightening in her chest that came when others questioned capabilities they hadn't personally witnessed. She had qualified expert marksmen on every weapon system in the SEAL inventory, including the Barrett M82A1 50 caliber sniper rifle. More importantly, she had made shots that others deemed impossible during previous deployments. "Who's taking the shot?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Morrison's eyes swept the room before settling on Chief Thompson. "Bull, you've got the most experience with extreme long-range work. You'll be primary sniper with Collins as spotter." Sarah's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She had outscored Thompson on every marksmanship qualification in the past year, including long-range precision shooting. Her smaller frame actually provided advantages in concealment and stability for extended shooting positions. But she had learned to pick her battles carefully in the male-dominated world of special operations. "Sir, I respectfully request to be considered for primary sniper," she said, her voice steady and professional. The room's atmosphere shifted subtly. Some of the newer team members exchanged glances that ranged from surprise to skepticism. Chief Thompson's weathered face remained neutral, but Sarah caught the slight tightening around his eyes. "Ghost, you're an outstanding marksman," Morrison replied, his tone diplomatic but firm. "But this shot requires someone with extensive experience in extreme long-range work. Bull has been making 1,000-meter-plus shots since before you joined the teams. With respect, sir, my qualification scores speak for themselves. I've consistently outperformed every member of this team in long-range precision shooting, including scenarios with similar environmental variables." Petty Officer Williams leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Qualification scores aren't the same as real-world conditions, Martinez. We're talking about an 1,800-meter shot in hostile territory with lives on the line." Sarah turned to face Williams, her dark eyes steady. "You're right, Torch. Which is why you should know that during my last deployment, I eliminated 3 insurgents at 1,400 meters during a sandstorm with visibility under 200 meters. The after-action report is available if you'd like to review it." The room fell silent again. Sarah had deliberately avoided mentioning her most challenging shot, a Taliban commander eliminated at 1,600 meters during a mission in the Hindu Kush Mountains. That operation remained classified at levels above most of the team's clearance. Chief Thompson's gruff voice broke the tension. Look, Ghost, nobody's questioning your skills, but this isn't about proving a point. If we miss those generals, they disappear for months, maybe years. Too much is riding on this for anything less than our absolute best option. Then you should want me taking that shot, Sarah replied, her voice carrying quiet confidence rather than arrogance. Because our absolute best option is the team member with the highest probability of success. Lieutenant Commander Morrison raised his hand to forestall further discussion. The decision's made. Thompson takes primary, Collins spots, Martinez provides rear security. We insert at 0200, establish positions by 0600, and execute at 0800. Questions? Sarah bit back her response. She had learned that direct confrontation rarely changed minds in military hierarchies. Instead, she would need to prove her point through actions rather than words. The briefing continued with tactical details, equipment assignments, and contingency plans. Sarah listened with professional attention while mentally calculating wind patterns, atmospheric conditions, and shooting positions. Her years of training had taught her to visualize complex shots before ever touching a rifle. As the team dispersed to prepare equipment, Chief Thompson approached her. His expression carried the mixture of respect and concern she had come to recognize from veteran operators. "Ghost, I know you're frustrated," he said quietly. "But this isn't personal. When I was your age, I wanted every challenging shot too. Experience teaches you when to trust your abilities and when to trust someone else's." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Chief, with all due respect, my abilities aren't theoretical. They're proven. And if this mission fails because pride prevented us from using our best assets, those deaths are on all of us." Thompson's jaw worked silently for a moment. The lieutenant commander made his decision. "Our job is to execute it flawlessly." "Understood, Chief. But if circumstances change during the mission, I hope you'll consider all available options." As Thompson walked away, Sarah began her mental preparation for the operation. She would perform her assigned role with absolute professionalism, but she would also be ready if the mission demanded more than rear security duties. The next 6 hours passed in the familiar rhythm of pre-mission preparation. Sarah meticulously cleaned and calibrated her primary weapon, a Heckler & Koch .416 assault rifle, while also preparing the Barrett M82A1 that Thompson would carry for the long-range shot. Her movements were precise and economical, each action performed with the muscle memory of thousands of hours of training. In the armory's fluorescent lighting, she carefully loaded match-grade ammunition into magazines, each round inspected for perfect consistency. The .50 caliber rounds for the Barrett were works of precision engineering, their brass cases gleaming like small artillery shells. Petty Officer Rodriguez approached her workspace, carrying his communication equipment. "Hey, Ghost, you doing okay? You've been pretty quiet since the briefing." Sarah looked up from her work, appreciating Wire's concern. Among the team members, Rodriguez had always treated her as an equal operator rather than an anomaly to be managed. "I'm fine, Wire, just focused on the mission." Rodriguez nodded, but his expression suggested he understood the deeper dynamics at play. "For what it's worth, I've seen your work. If I needed someone to make an impossible shot, you'd be my choice." The simple statement meant more than Rodriguez probably realized. Recognition from peers carried more weight than commendations from commanders who had never pulled a trigger in combat. "Thanks, Wire. Let's just focus on bringing everyone home." As night fell over the base, Sarah completed her final equipment check. Her gear was arranged with obsessive precision, every piece of equipment in its assigned location, every backup system tested and verified. Her sniper's ghillie suit lay carefully folded, its artificial vegetation selected specifically for the Afghan mountain environment they would encounter. The team assembled at the helicopter landing zone at 01:30 hours. The UH-60 Black Hawk sat silently on the tarmac, its rotors still as the crew performed final pre-flight checks. The night air carried the familiar smell of aviation fuel and hydraulic fluid that meant another insertion into hostile territory. Lieutenant Commander Morrison conducted a final equipment inspection, his tactical flashlight revealing the serious faces of 8 warriors ready for combat. Each team member carried approximately 60 pounds of equipment: weapons, ammunition, communication devices, medical supplies, and specialized gear for their assigned roles. Sarah's load included her primary weapon, sidearm, communication equipment, medical kit, and enough ammunition for an extended firefight. Additionally, she carried a spotting scope and rangefinder that could prove invaluable if the mission's parameters changed. "Remember, once we insert, radio silence until we reach the objective," Morrison announced as the helicopter's engines began their startup sequence. "Weather reports indicate clear skies with winds variable from 5 to 15 knots. Temperature at elevation will be approximately 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The information was crucial for Thompson's shot calculations. Temperature affected bullet trajectory through changes in air density, while wind would be the primary variable requiring real-time adjustment. As the team boarded the helicopter, Sarah took her assigned seat and began the mental transition from base operations to combat mode. The Black Hawk's interior was dimly lit by red lights that preserved night vision while allowing crew members to read instruments and maps. The helicopter lifted off smoothly, its rotor wash stirring dust clouds visible in the base's perimeter lighting. Within minutes, they were flying through complete darkness over the Afghan landscape, navigating by instruments and night vision technology. Sarah closed her eyes and visualized the mission timeline. In approximately 90 minutes, they would reach the insertion point. Then a 4-hour movement through mountainous terrain to establish overwatch positions. By sunrise, they would either be in position to complete their mission or dealing with complications that could cost lives. The rhythmic thrum of the helicopter's engines provided a backdrop for final mental preparation. Sarah ran through ballistic calculations, environmental factors, and potential contingencies. If called upon, she would be ready. But first, she had to hope that Chief Thompson's experience and Lieutenant Commander Morrison's confidence proved sufficient for what promised to be one of the most challenging shots any of them had ever attempted. The Black Hawk descended through the darkness like a steel predator, its engines muffled by special acoustic dampening technology. Through her night vision goggles, Sarah watched the Afghan landscape unfold below, jagged mountain peaks and deep valleys carved by centuries of wind and weather. The terrain looked alien in the green glow of enhanced vision, a maze of shadows and rocky outcroppings that could conceal either safety or death. 5 minutes to insertion, the crew chief announced through their headsets, his voice barely audible over the rotor noise. Lieutenant Commander Morrison gave the team a final visual check, his tactical light briefly illuminating each operator. 8 faces stared back, painted with camouflage and focused with the intensity that came before stepping into hostile territory. The helicopter's cabin felt smaller as the moment approached, the weight of weapons and equipment pressing against every surface. Sarah felt the familiar pre-combat sensation, heightened awareness combined with controlled breathing that kept adrenaline from overwhelming tactical thinking. Her hands performed automatic equipment checks while her mind calculated the variables they would face in the coming hours. The helicopter flared suddenly, its nose rising as the pilots executed the insertion maneuver. Through the open door, Sarah glimpsed rocky ground rushing past in a blur of shadows and scattered vegetation. The Black Hawk hovered 3 feet above the landing zone, its rotor wash creating a dust storm that would have blinded them without night vision technology. "Go, go, go!" Morrison shouted, and 8 operators flowed from the aircraft in perfect sequence. Sarah hit the ground running, her boots finding purchase on loose rock and dried earth. The helicopter's engines immediately began spooling up for departure, the crew eager to clear the area before enemy forces could locate and engage the aircraft. Within 30 seconds, the Black Hawk was climbing back into the darkness, leaving the team alone in hostile territory. The silence that followed was profound. After hours of helicopter noise, the mountain environment felt almost oppressive in its quiet. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat and the soft rustle of equipment as the team formed their movement formation. Morrison checked his GPS device and pointed northwest toward a ridge barely visible against the star-filled sky. The team began moving in tactical formation, Thompson taking point, followed by Collins and Rodriguez, then Morrison, Sarah, Williams, and 2 additional operators providing rear security. Their movement through the mountain terrain required careful balance between speed and stealth. Each footstep had to be placed precisely to avoid loose rocks that could create noise or reveal their position. The rocky ground made silent movement challenging, but years of training had taught them how to move like ghosts through any environment. After 2 hours of careful movement, they reached a position roughly halfway to their objective. Morrison called a halt in a natural depression between 2 boulders that provided concealment from observation. The team took the opportunity to hydrate and consume energy bars while maintaining security watches in all directions. Chief Thompson approached Sarah during the brief rest, his weathered face barely visible in the darkness. "How you holding up, Ghost?" "Good to go, Chief. Terrain's challenging but manageable." Thompson nodded, studying the ridgeline that represented their final objective. "I've been thinking about the wind patterns. These valleys can create unpredictable currents, especially as the sun comes up and starts heating the rock faces." Sarah recognized this as Thompson's way of acknowledging the shot's complexity without admitting uncertainty. The morning thermal patterns could definitely complicate things. Air temperature differential between the valley floor and ridgeline will create convection currents. Exactly, which is why I might need that spotting scope of yours to get a better read on environmental conditions. It was a small concession, but Sarah appreciated Thompson's willingness to use all available resources. "Whatever you need, Chief. We all want the same outcome." The team resumed movement as false dawn began lightening the eastern horizon. The approaching daylight would provide better visibility, but also increase their exposure to enemy observation. They needed to reach their overwatch positions before full sunrise revealed their presence on the mountainside. The final approach to the ridgeline proved more challenging than anticipated. The terrain was steeper and more exposed than the aerial reconnaissance photos had suggested, requiring them to move in single file along narrow paths between rock outcroppings. Each step had to be calculated carefully to avoid creating rock slides that could alert enemy forces. Sarah found herself impressed by the team's movement discipline. Despite the challenging terrain and approaching deadline, every operator maintained noise and visual discipline that spoke to years of elite training. They moved like a single organism, each member instinctively supporting the other's positions and security responsibilities. As they crested the final ridge, the target compound came into view in the valley below. The early morning light revealed details that had been hidden in the reconnaissance photos: additional guard positions, more extensive defensive barriers, and what appeared to be increased activity levels, suggesting the compound was on higher alert than intelligence had indicated. Morrison signaled for the team to establish positions along the ridgeline using natural rock formations for concealment. Thompson and Collins moved to the primary shooting position, a depression between 2 large boulders that provided excellent concealment while offering clear sightlines to the compound. Sarah took her assigned position approximately 50 meters to their right, where she could provide security coverage while maintaining visual contact with the primary shooting team. Her position offered an alternative angle to the compound, though the range would be slightly greater due to the geometry of the ridgeline. Through her spotting scope, Sarah began detailed observation of the compound's activity patterns. Guards moved between positions in what appeared to be coordinated patrol schedules. The defensive positions were more sophisticated than expected, with prepared fighting positions and pre-planned fields of fire that would make any assault extremely costly. "Ghost, this is Bull," Thompson's voice came through her earpiece. "I'm having trouble getting a clear view of the target building from this position. Can you confirm the windows on the eastern wall?" Sarah adjusted her spotting scope and studied the compound's central building. "I count 3 windows on the eastern wall, but the middle one has metal bars that weren't visible in the aerial photos. The northern exposure might offer better visibility into the meeting room." "Copy that. Collins, can we adjust position for a northern angle?" Sarah watched as Thompson and Collins attempted to find an alternative shooting position that would provide the required angle. The ridgeline's topography limited their options, and each potential position seemed to offer different complications. "Bull, this is Ghost," Sarah transmitted after several minutes of observation. "From my position, I have a clear sight line to the northern exposure of the target building. Range is approximately 1,900 meters, but the angle provides unobstructed visibility into what appears to be the meeting room." There was a pause before Thompson responded. "Ghost, maintain your security position. I'm working on solutions from the primary location." Sarah understood Thompson's reluctance to deviate from the planned shooting position, but she could see problems developing that threatened the mission's success. The compound's defensive improvements and the ridgeline's limitations were creating complications that hadn't been anticipated during planning. "Movement in the compound," Rodriguez reported from his observation position. "Multiple personnel moving toward the central building. Looks like preparation for some kind of meeting or briefing." Morrison checked his watch and confirmed their timeline. "We're approaching 0800 hours. Everyone maintain positions and prepare for target acquisition." Through her spotting scope, Sarah watched as figures began gathering in the compound's central building. The window facing her position provided clear visibility into what was obviously a meeting room, with a large table and multiple chairs arranged for a formal briefing. "I have 3 high-value targets entering the meeting room," she reported quietly. "Positive identification on individuals matching the reconnaissance photos." "Bull, do you have visual confirmation?" Morrison asked. There was a longer pause before Thompson responded, and Sarah could hear the frustration in his voice. "Negative, clear visual. The angle from this position is partially obstructed by structural elements. I can see movement but cannot confirm individual identification." The mission was approaching a critical decision point. The targets were present and exposed, but the primary sniper couldn't achieve the clear shot required for mission success. Every minute of delay increased the risk of detection or the targets leaving the building. "Ghost, can you maintain positive identification from your position?" Morrison's voice carried the weight of command decisions being made in real time. "Affirmative. Clear visual identification of all 3 targets. They're positioned at the table in what appears to be a planning session. Current range is 1,920 meters." Sarah could feel the tension building across the team's communication network. The mission's success hung in the balance, with a shot that exceeded even the most optimistic expectations for successful engagement. "Sir," Thompson's voice came through the radio with obvious reluctance. "I cannot guarantee accurate target engagement from this position. The structural obstructions and range limitations significantly reduce probability of success." Morrison's pause stretched longer than usual as he calculated options and risks. Sarah knew he was weighing the mission's importance against the team's safety and the political consequences of failure. "All team members maintain positions. Ghost, continue target observation and report any changes in target status or location." Through her scope, Sarah watched the 3 Taliban generals studying maps and documents spread across the meeting room table. Their animated discussion suggested important operational planning that could affect coalition forces across the region. Intelligence estimates indicated that eliminating these 3 individuals could significantly disrupt enemy operations for months. "Targets appear to be conducting detailed planning session," she reported. "Multiple maps and documents visible. This appears to be a high-level strategic meeting. The implications were clear. This opportunity might not present itself again for months or even years. The three generals rarely met in person due to security concerns, and their current exposure was the intelligence windfall that demanded action. "Bull, what's your assessment of shot probability from current position?" Morrison asked. Thompson's response carried the honesty of a professional who understood the stakes. "Sir, at this range with current obstructions, I estimate less than 20% probability of successful target engagement. Environmental factors are stable, but the angle and partial obstructions significantly reduce accuracy expectations." Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she realized the mission was approaching failure despite perfect intelligence and flawless execution to this point. The targets were exposed, the environmental conditions were manageable, and the team was in position. But the physical limitations of the primary shooting position threatened to make success impossible. "Ghost, what's your assessment from your position?" Morrison's question carried implications that everyone on the team understood. Sarah took a deep breath before responding, knowing that her answer would determine not just the mission's outcome, but potentially her future with the team. "Sir, I have clear visibility of all three targets with no obstructions. Range is 1,920 meters. Wind conditions are manageable with current atmospheric readings. Shooting position offers excellent stability and concealment." The radio silence that followed stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Sarah could imagine the calculations and considerations running through Morrison's mind. Mission success versus established protocols, proven capabilities versus institutional preferences, immediate tactical needs versus long-term team dynamics. "All positions, report target status," Morrison finally transmitted. "Bull here. Target still in position but partially obscured. No clear shot available." "Ghost here. Targets remain in meeting room. Clear visibility maintained. They appear to be reviewing operational timelines." "Wire here. Communications intercept indicates meeting scheduled to conclude within 10 minutes. The timeline was collapsing. If the generals left the meeting room, the opportunity would be lost. Coalition forces would continue facing coordinated attacks planned by these three individuals, and the mission would represent a complete failure despite perfect preparation and execution. Sarah watched through her scope as one of the generals stood and moved toward what appeared to be a communication device. Intelligence briefings had indicated these individuals maintained strict communication security, suggesting they might be preparing to conclude their meeting and return to separate locations. "Target movement," she reported. "One individual moving toward communication equipment. Meeting may be concluding ahead of schedule." Morrison's voice carried the authority of final decision. "Ghost, prepare for target engagement. Bull, shift to spotter role and provide technical support." Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with professional focus. This was the moment she had trained for throughout her career. The opportunity to prove that gender meant nothing compared to skill and dedication when lives hung in the balance. "Copy that, sir." Transitioning to primary sniper role. She could hear Thompson's movement as he shifted positions to provide spotting support. Despite his earlier reservations, she knew he would provide professional assistance once the decision was made. The mission's success now depended on their ability to work together, regardless of personal opinions about who should take the shot. Sarah settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar weight of the Barrett M82A1 as she acquired her targets through the scope. 1,900 meters, over a mile, with environmental variables that would challenge the world's best marksmen. But the targets were clear. The position was stable, and years of training had prepared her for exactly this moment. The morning air was crisp and still, with wind readings indicating manageable conditions for extreme long-range shooting. Through her scope, she could see all three generals clearly positioned around the meeting room table, their body language suggesting intense discussion of operational matters. "Ghost, wind reading 2 to 4 knots from the northwest," Thompson's voice came through her earpiece as he provided professional spotting support. Atmospheric conditions stable. Temperature steady at 42 degrees. Sarah made microscopic adjustments to her scope settings, accounting for the range, elevation difference, and atmospheric conditions. The mathematics of extreme long-range shooting required precise calculations, but muscle memory and experience provided intuitive understanding that complemented technical knowledge. Range confirmed at 1,920 meters, she responded quietly. Target acquisition complete. All three individuals clearly visible and stationary. The moment of truth was approaching. 3 shots at extreme range against high-value targets whose elimination could save hundreds of coalition lives. Success would validate years of training and prove that capability mattered more than preconceptions. Failure would cost lives and potentially end her career with the teams. Sarah controlled her breathing and began the final target acquisition sequence that would determine the mission's outcome. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Afghan valley as Sarah Martinez settled into the most critical shooting position of her career. Through the Barrett's powerful scope, the 3 Taliban generals appeared close enough to touch, despite being nearly 2,000 meters away. Her breathing steadied into the controlled rhythm that separated elite marksmen from ordinary soldiers. Wind holding steady at 3 knots northwest. Chief Thompson's voice came through her earpiece, his professional demeanor unchanged despite the role reversal. Atmospheric pressure stable. You've got optimal conditions for the next few minutes? Sarah made final scope adjustments, her movements precise and economical. Years of training had taught her that extreme long-range shooting required more than just technical skill. It demanded absolute confidence in equipment, calculations, and personal ability. Doubt was a luxury she couldn't afford when coalition lives depended on her accuracy. Target priority confirmed, she whispered into her radio. General Nazir seated at head of table, General Shah to his left, General Rashid examining documents to his right. All 3 in clear view. Through her scope, Sarah could see intimate details of the enemy planning session. Maps covered the table showing coalition base locations, supply routes, and what appeared to be timing schedules for coordinated attacks. The intelligence value of this meeting was enormous, but their primary mission remained elimination of these 3 commanders who had orchestrated months of successful operations against coalition forces. Ghost, you are cleared hot, Lieutenant Commander Morrison's voice carried the weight of final authorization. Weapons free on all 3 targets. Sarah's world narrowed to the crosshairs of her scope and the rhythmic beating of her heart. She had trained for shots like this thousands of times, but never with such stakes or under such scrutiny. Every member of her team was watching, evaluating, and calculating whether their female teammate could deliver when everything mattered most. The first target sat perfectly positioned at the head of the conference table. General Nazir, the regional Taliban commander whose strategic planning had killed over 100 coalition soldiers in the past 6 months. Sarah centered her crosshairs on the man's forehead, accounting for the bullet's trajectory over nearly 2,000 meters of mountain air. Her finger found the trigger with familiar precision. The Barrett's trigger mechanism was heavier than most sniper rifles, designed to prevent accidental discharge of the massive .50 caliber rounds. Sarah had spent countless hours training with this exact trigger system until pulling it became as natural as breathing. The mathematics of extreme long-range shooting played through her mind like a complex equation. Bullet drop at this range would be approximately 32 feet, requiring significant elevation adjustment. Wind drift would push the projectile roughly 18 inches to the left, necessitating lateral compensation. Air temperature and atmospheric pressure affected bullet velocity and trajectory in ways that required intuitive understanding gained through years of experience. First target acquired, she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. Sarah controlled her breathing, timing the shot for the natural respiratory pause between inhale and exhale. Her heartbeat steadied into the slow rhythm that indicated optimal physiological conditions for precision shooting. The crosshairs settled on target with rock-steady precision. The Barrett erupted with thunderous force, its massive muzzle brake redirecting gases to control recoil. The 50 caliber round departed at 2,800 feet per second, beginning its 2-second journey across the valley toward the Taliban compound. Through her scope, Sarah maintained target observation as the bullet traversed the distance. At extreme ranges, projectile flight time allowed for target tracking throughout the engagement sequence. She watched the first general's head snap backward as the match-grade round found its mark with devastating precision. "Target 1 eliminated," Thompson's voice carried professional appreciation for marksmanship excellence. "Clean hit, center mass cranium, transitioning to target 2. Sarah's training took over as she acquired the second target. General Shah had begun rising from his chair in response to his commander's sudden collapse, presenting a more challenging shot as his position shifted. The mathematics changed instantaneously. Different angle, modified elevation, altered wind compensation requirements. Her scope tracked smoothly to the second target, crosshairs settling on center mass as Shah turned toward his fallen commander. The movement created a larger target profile but also introduced timing considerations that complicated the shot calculation. Target 2 acquired, standing position, lateral movement minimal, she reported while making microscopic adjustments for the changed geometry. The second shot required immediate execution before the target could move to cover or the remaining general could flee the meeting room. Sarah's breathing settled into firing rhythm as her finger found the trigger's familiar resistance point. The Barrett spoke again, its report echoing across the valley like rolling thunder. The second round followed an identical trajectory, modified only by the fractional adjustments needed for the new target position. General Shah dropped instantly, the massive round's impact eliminating any possibility of survival or recovery. 2 down, 1 remaining. "Excellent shooting, Ghost," Morrison's voice carried obvious satisfaction with the mission's progress. "Target 3 status?" Through her scope, Sarah could see General Rashid scrambling toward what appeared to be a communication device positioned near the meeting room's far wall. The third target was moving rapidly, creating the most challenging shot sequence of the engagement. Target 3 mobile, moving toward communication equipment, approximately 6 feet of movement remaining before reaching cover. The timing was critical. If Rashid reached the communication device, he could alert regional forces and coordinate immediate response to their position. More importantly, his escape would represent mission failure and continued threat to coalition operations throughout the region. Sarah tracked the moving target with practiced precision, her scope following Rashid's movement while calculating lead time and trajectory adjustments needed for a shot on a mobile target at extreme range. Moving target engagements multiplied the complexity of extreme long-range shooting exponentially. Range unchanged, wind stable, target speed approximately 4 feet per second. Thompson provided updated environmental intelligence while maintaining his professional spotting support. Sarah's crosshairs led the target by approximately 3 feet, accounting for bullet flight time and target movement. The calculation required instantaneous processing of multiple variables while maintaining steady aim on a target that appeared smaller than a postage stamp through her scope. The third shot demanded perfect timing. Too early, and the bullet would pass behind the target. Too late, and Rashid would reach cover. Sarah's breathing steadied into the final sequence as her finger applied pressure to the Barrett's trigger. The massive rifle thundered for the third time, sending its final round across the valley toward the fleeing Taliban general. Sarah maintained target tracking through the shot, watching as Rashid collapsed mere inches from the communication equipment that could have compromised their mission. "Target 3 eliminated," she announced with quiet satisfaction. "All 3 high-value targets confirmed down. Mission complete." The silence that followed stretched across the team's communication network as the magnitude of her accomplishments settled over everyone. 3 shots at nearly 2,000 meters, each requiring precise calculation and flawless execution, each finding its mark with surgical precision. Outstanding marksmanship, Ghost. Morrison's voice carried genuine appreciation for exceptional performance under pressure. That was textbook extreme long-range shooting under combat conditions. Through her scope, Sarah could see the compound's guards beginning to react to the sudden violence in their command center. Soldiers were moving rapidly between buildings, searching for the source of the attack, while medical personnel rushed toward the meeting room. Compound guards reacting to contact, she reported while maintaining observation of the target area. Multiple personnel moving toward central building. No immediate threat to our position. Chief Thompson appeared beside her position, his weathered face carrying an expression she had never seen before. Complete professional respect unmarked by any trace of condescension or qualification. Ghost, that was the finest shooting I've witnessed in 20 years of special operations, he said quietly. 3 perfect shots under extreme conditions against high-value targets. You just saved a lot of coalition lives. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction that went beyond personal achievement. She had proven that capability mattered more than gender when lives hung in the balance. More importantly, she had eliminated 3 enemy commanders whose deaths would significantly disrupt Taliban operations across the region. Time to move, people, Morrison announced as he checked his watch. Local forces will be responding to the compound's alert signals. We need to be off this ridgeline in 15 minutes. The team began their withdrawal with the disciplined efficiency that characterized elite units. Equipment was packed quickly but methodically, ensuring nothing was left behind that could compromise future operations or reveal their presence to enemy forces. As they moved down the mountain slope toward their extraction point, Rodriguez appeared beside Sarah during a brief security halt. That was incredible shooting, Ghost. I've never seen anything like it. 3 targets at that range with perfect accuracy. That's going to be talked about in sniper schools for decades. Sarah appreciated the recognition from her teammates, but her focus remained on their safe extraction from hostile territory. Mission accomplishment meant nothing if the team didn't return home intact. The movement to their extraction point required 2 hours of careful navigation through increasingly hostile terrain. Intelligence reports indicated enemy forces were mobilizing throughout the region in response to the compound attack, making their withdrawal timeline critical for avoiding contact with superior numbers. Extraction bird inbound. 5 minutes, Morrison announced as they reached the designated helicopter landing zone. Outstanding work, everyone. This mission will significantly impact enemy operational capability throughout the region. The Black Hawk appeared over the ridgeline exactly on schedule, its pilots navigating by GPS and night vision technology despite the growing daylight. The aircraft settled into a textbook landing approach, its crew maintaining constant vigilance for threats during the vulnerable extraction sequence. As the team boarded the helicopter, Sarah felt the familiar relief that came with successful mission completion. But more than that, she felt the satisfaction of proving herself under the most demanding circumstances possible. Chief Thompson took the seat beside her as the aircraft lifted off, the compound shrinking to toy-like proportions below them. His expression carried the serious demeanor of a senior operator addressing a peer rather than a subordinate. "Ghost, I owe you an apology," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the helicopter noise. "I let experience bias cloud my judgment about capability. You demonstrated skills today that few snipers possess, regardless of their background or experience level." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Chief, you were doing what you thought best for the mission. That's what good leaders do. Today just proved that sometimes the best option isn't the most obvious one." Thompson nodded slowly. "That's exactly the attitude that makes you an exceptional operator. You proved your point with performance rather than argument, and you did it when it mattered most." Lieutenant Commander Morrison appeared beside their seats. his expression carrying the satisfaction of a commander whose calculated risk had produced exceptional results. "Ghost, that shooting performance is going into my after-action report with highest possible commendations," he said. "3 successful eliminations of high-value targets under extreme long-range conditions represents marksmanship excellence by any standard." Sarah felt genuine appreciation for Morrison's recognition, but her response reflected the team-first mentality that defined elite special operations units. "Sir, the mission succeeded because everyone performed their roles professionally. Thompson's spotting support was critical for accurate environmental readings, and the team's security coverage allowed me to focus completely on target engagement." Morrison smiled at her deflection of individual credit. "Spoken like a true team player. But don't underestimate what you accomplished today. Those 3 shots under those conditions, that's the kind of performance that becomes legend in our community." As the helicopter flew toward their base, Sarah reflected on the morning's events. She had faced the most challenging shooting situation of her career and succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. More importantly, she had earned the complete respect of teammates who would never again question her capabilities based on gender rather than performance. The compound below showed continued activity as enemy forces responded to the attack, but their reaction would ultimately prove futile. The 3 generals responsible for coordinating regional Taliban operations were gone, their detailed planning documents captured by overhead reconnaissance, and their command structure disrupted in ways that would take months to rebuild. Petty Officer Williams approached her seat as the helicopter began its final approach to base. The close-quarters combat specialist, who had questioned her qualifications during the mission briefing, now carried a completely different expression. "Ghost, I need to say something," he began, his Brooklyn accent carrying obvious sincerity. "I was wrong about your capabilities. Dead wrong. What you did today was extraordinary by any measure. You saved this mission when conventional wisdom said it couldn't be done." Sarah appreciated Williams's directness, and his willingness to acknowledge changed perspectives. "Torch, you were protecting the mission by questioning everything. That's what good operators do. Today just showed that sometimes the unconventional option is the right one." The helicopter touched down smoothly at their base, the familiar sounds and smells of military aviation signaling their return to safety. As the team disembarked and began post-mission procedures, Sarah felt a fundamental shift in her relationship with her teammates. She was no longer the female SEAL who needed to prove herself. She was simply an elite operator who had demonstrated exceptional capability when it mattered most. The distinction would make all the difference in future missions and her continued career with the teams. In the post-mission briefing room, intelligence analysts confirmed the significance of their success. Intercepted communications indicated complete disruption of Taliban command structure in the region, with remaining commanders scrambling to understand how their most secure location had been compromised so thoroughly. Initial battle damage assessment indicates complete elimination of all 3 high-value targets, the intelligence officer announced to the assembled team. Additionally, overhead reconnaissance captured detailed photographs of their planning documents before security forces could secure the meeting room. The implications were enormous. Not only had they eliminated 3 key enemy commanders, but they had also captured intelligence that would allow coalition forces to anticipate and counter planned attacks throughout the region. As the briefing concluded and the team prepared for stand-down time, Chief Thompson approached Sarah one final time. His expression carried the mixture of professional respect and personal gratitude that characterized relationships between operators who had shared life-or-death experiences. "Ghost, I want you to know something," he said quietly. 20 years from now, when people ask me about the finest shooting I ever witnessed in combat, I'm going to tell them about 3 perfect shots on a mountainside in Afghanistan. And I'm going to tell them those shots were made by the best sniper I ever had the privilege to serve with. Sarah felt a warmth that went beyond professional satisfaction. She had proven herself under the most demanding circumstances possible and earned the respect of warriors whose approval meant more than any medal or commendation. Thank you, Chief. That means everything to me. As Thompson walked away, Sarah began cleaning her equipment with the methodical precision that characterized her approach to everything. The Barrett M82A1 had performed flawlessly, its 3 rounds finding their targets with surgical precision across nearly 2,000 meters of Afghan mountain air. But more than equipment reliability or environmental conditions, the mission had succeeded because training, skill, and determination had overcome institutional bias and conventional thinking. When lives hung in the balance, capability mattered more than preconceptions. Sarah Martinez had proven that point with 3 perfect shots that would be remembered and discussed in special operations circles for years to come. She had earned her place among the elite not through quotas or special consideration, but through exceptional performance when failure meant death. And in the brotherhood of warriors who understood the true cost of freedom, that was the only currency that mattered.